Hello and welcome to Chile Talk again. I'm Neil Davidson. I'm with Pete Lee. I'm in Buenos Aires. He's in Santiago. And we are going to talk again about yesterday's big vote for the Constitutional Council in Chile, which we made some predictions for. Now, Pete, you were there. What was it like? What was the day like?
Well, there was a lot of voting. We had a lot of people voting during the day. We had the usual really bottleneck towards the close of the polls, both at voting locations and also at police stations, where people who aren't near their home voting booth could register that fact and avoid a fine.
Now, I think you've got a slightly, well, you seem to have caught the sun a bit, and one of your eyes is a bit red.
Well,
so what? Do my Sherlock Holmes bit here. What happened?
As it happens, the pollution in central Chile, and I voted in Valparaiso, and I went from Santiago to get there. The pollution was terrible in Santiago. Santiago often has bad pollution, and it was absolutely awful. The sky was certainly not blue, and even in Valparaiso, which is by the sea, the sky was grey. It wasn't blue. We couldn't see very far. We couldn't see the mountains, which you usually can in Santiago. It was a terrible day, but people were voting because it's compulsory.
Well, I was going to say, well, that might be an omen for what could be quite a testing and murky constitutional process. But as you say, you mentioned the queues at the police stations for people who were like away from home, whatever. To get out of voting. Voting was compulsory, and there is some evidence, isn't there, that people didn't go to vote very cheerfully in a lot of cases. They weren't enthused by the candidates because there were a lot of blank and spoiled ballots, right?
Well over 2 million blank and spoiled null votes, a huge number.
That's like 16, was it 16 or 17% of the entire vote?
Yes, a high number, a very high number. And there are two.
I think I'm right in saying that blank and spoiled votes got twice the vote share of the second biggest party.
Oh, it was a high number. Not quite that high, but not the second highest list anyway. There were two factors feeding into this. One, people are pissed off at having to vote again. We've been averaging 1.5 elections a year for a long time. Also, you have people who really like the last constitution and are annoyed at the fact that something like the last, when I say the last constitution, I mean the last proposal, are annoyed at the fact that this one isn't going to be that much like the last one.
And of course, there are people who like the last constitution, i.e. the current still existing constitution, and they include probably the winners, really, don't they? But anyway, maybe you want to get into that.
Yes, I mean, the winners is a very interesting grouping, and they've got a lot of growing up to do. They've got a very impressive win. But really, first we should talk about the losers.
Let's start from the bottom. Let's start with the losers.
Because the losers is virtually everyone else. Well, the Party for the People, the kind of populist party from up north, led by Franco Parisi, bombed. They had a scandal running into the last days of the election. Since last we filmed, one of their candidates had a charge on her record for drug offences, so that affected their vote. They may well be gone. Another group that may well be gone is basically the rump of what used to be the Concertación, the famous centrist grouping that ruled from 1990 to 2010. That grouping, called Todo por Chile, didn't reach a single seat. They didn't get anything. So they did very badly indeed. There was one Indigenous supernumerary place that got through, where the winner has leanings towards the left, some involvement in the Communist Party in the past, but has won a place. So there is Indigenous representation here. You can't say that there isn't. That was pointed out to me by our friend Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another group that basically lost was Chile Vamos, the right, centre-right grouping that has lost another right grouping that we'll finally get around to. Chile Vamos, running as Chile Seguro, only got 11 spots, which was pretty much the opposite to what I thought would happen. I thought Chile Vamos, simply by covering the whole country, would get a spot everywhere and some extra ones. Didn't happen. They only got 11 out of 16 provinces.
So just to remind you that Chile Vamos contains UDI,
Renovación Nacional,
and Evopolis, right?
and Evopoli. And Evopoli is sort of the hip newer version of UDI. Now, another grouping that actually did better than some projections were saying, with 17 of the 50 seats, is Unidad para Chile, which is basically the coalition aligned to the government. 17 is better than the 16 that was being expected, but it's still not very good. The government was smashed at this election, and they were smashed by Cast's party, the Republicanos. The Republicanos, who I thought would do fairly well and get, 8, 9, 10 seats, they got 22.
Let's just talk about your prediction, because your aggregate prediction was just about right, wasn't it? You were talking about 57%, 58% for the right, I think.
Yeah, I was saying that there would be almost 30%. Almost 30 places for the two right groupings, that is Chile Seguro and Republicanos. I thought there would be almost 30, which is kind of the magical number, because basically 20 is the number, the blocking number.
And 30 override everybody else. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but no, there was not. There was 33. A huge number coming into the right, including 22 to this very new party of Cast, this very new grouping, Republicanos, who absolutely smashed it. And there are important implications for this in terms of the way that Cast can be thought about. So when we often gloss who Cast is in English, we often say, he's Bolsonaro adjacent or Cast or Trump-like. Well, actually, Cast was never quite like that. He's more of a homespun, kind of quietly spoken lawyer who happens to be very conservative, very enterprisingly conservative. And Cast is now able, now that he's a front runner as the leader of this party, he wasn't running himself in the election, he's able to position himself as somebody who could be certainly almost a majoritarian figure who could be elected president. Boric, of course, is president at the moment, and he's far from a majoritarian figure, but in a runoff, he was. And Cast is very viable for being able to turn himself that way. And that would mean being, rather than playing up the hard man image, he can play with it a bit more and try to meet the needs of the population. Of course, one of the big needs is something that the Republicanos are now pointing out is not something that you solve with the Constitution. The government needs to take charge of security and immigration and issues like that, just in the day-to-day work of politics. So supplementing that with a Constitution that supports the capacity for that is the sort of way that Republicanos can lead this process.
That's right. I mean, just to touch briefly on, his appeal possibly as a presidential candidate, as a unifying candidate. The traditional right-wing thing of being tough on immigration, as you mentioned, has enormous support in the country. I think 86% of voters, of people polled, want undocumented migrants to be sent straight home.
Yes.
So you know, he occupies the kind of centre ground on that, the new centre ground, I guess.
Yes, and also quite sensibly not taking immediate responsibility for it. The Constitution is there for the country's benefit going forward for future decades. It's not for solving everything. And they've made that clear for the get-go, from the get-go. So Cast may well be changing his image, and I think people will increasingly not be comparing him rather inadequately, to be honest, with figures like Bolsonaro in the much more tropical and exciting Brazilian politics, or indeed Trump in the extraordinary politics where he made it to the top and may well make it again. I don't know. That's not looking so likely anymore.
So what does this mean then for the actual constitution? Because I mean, the right, broadly speaking, didn't even really want a new constitution, and now they've got to produce them. You know, they simply have to.
They certainly didn't want a constitution devoted to refounding every aspect and to denigrating what progress Chile has made in the case of the far right, including during the military government of Pinochet. But certainly since the military government of Pinochet, of course, Chile had some real boom years there. But now that they're in the lead, in the box seat, they are interested in, well, we could change the president's name on this document. It's already the name of President Lagos, president in the early 2000s, because he overhauled Pinochet's original version, but also it's Pinochet's constitution as well as Lagos's constitution. So they'll be able to change that name definitively, and they'll be able to change the year and say that this is the constitution of, well, 2023, if it makes it through. Now, there is some breakout talent in this Republicans group. Of course, the fear is that they'll basically melt down into the usual rabble that happens when the people give anyone too much of a mandate in Chile, as happened in the unusual process of the original constitutional convention. But we have the arrival at last, after many attempts to make it, he tried to get into the Constitutional Convention before, the extraordinary figure of Professor, as he's known, Luis Silva. He's a constitutional law professor at Universidad de los Andes, which is the university explicitly aligned to the Opus Dei movement. How would you describe the Opus Dei movement to our viewers?
Well, it's just a very conservative, gosh, I'm a bit hazy, really, to be honest. It's just a very conservative Catholic movement that is international. It's certainly not just Chilean. And beyond vaguely associating it with Latin Mass and things, though, I don't quite know what the exact position is. But it's certainly international. It's very big in Chile. It's probably bigger. My idea is it's probably bigger in Chile than almost anywhere else, you know, proportionally. Yes.
Well, Chile had multiple times a man openly associated with Opus Dei, because there are some who are not openly associated with the movement. Joaquin Lavín multiply attempt to become president, and he would have been the first head of government or head of state aligned with Opus Dei. And Prof. Luis Silva also is aligned with Opus Dei. Now, of course, in the English-speaking world, Opus Dei is sort of the stuff of conspiracy theories, you know, sort of Elders of Zion or Freemasonry sort of conspiracy theories. You know, and it's not a conspiracy theory; it's a real thing. It's very popular among the groupings, the conservative groupings that were aligned to different, what we would call generally fascist movements. Particularly, obviously, it came out of Franco's Spain, and throughout Latin America, there have been different movements like that, of course, including the Pinochet years here in Chile. So it's a solidly conservative grouping that has elites aligned to it, but also does a hell of a lot of work really trying outreach with poorer Chileans. Some of it's made fun of for, you know, a kind of, I guess it's a bit like what Max Weber talks about in terms of the Protestant ethic, each in their place, each in their station, each in their calling, each in their station, which is from the gospel, adopted as this idea of, you know, trying to develop your vocation and make something of yourself. You know, there's a lot of criticism that Opus Dei has programs for training working class women to become nanas, domestic help and so on, and also has programs for teaching women to, what they call domestic engineering. Engineering is a much abused term in Chilean higher education, and domestic engineering is huswifery, housewifery. So that's one of its eccentricities. And Louis Silva,
we used to call it home economics at school when it still existed in Britain. I'm old enough to have seen that, you know.
Yes, that's the beautiful, well, I guess Americanism more than anything. But yeah, domestic engineering, it's called in Chile, at least at Universidad de los Andes. And Luis Silva, he's a sort of moon-faced guy. He's a lovely guy. He's done a lot of outreach work. He's a very pious Catholic. He's a very pious member of Opus Dei. And I actually think he looks stoned. He looks like he's on a drug. He's on a drug, but as it turns out, that drug is merely the Republic of Chile and Jesus. He's a very sincere person who wants the best for society, and an extraordinary new talent who's an extremely good communicator. So it's going to be very interesting to see if he's going to be a major face, much in the way that Jaime Bassa, the original deputy president of the Constitutional Convention, was kind of one of the major faces, along with Fernando Atria, who, like Bassa and like Silva, is a constitutional lawyer, lots of ideas about what the Constitution should be. Well, Silva's got his own ideas about what the Constitution should be, and it looks like he's got the charisma and the quirkiness in many ways to make an impact not only within the council but also on the general population. He may well be a sort of a voter whisperer, a Chilean whisperer. He may well be able to make this work. We'll have to see, but it's going to take a lot of discipline on the part of Republicanos and also what's left of Chile Seguro, Chile Vamos, to come up with a good enough document that not just 50% of the vote plus one, but hopefully 60, 70% of Chileans can say, well, this is good enough. You know, this is a good enough thing. It's not a complete embarrassment. That's what they'll be aiming for. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether they can do it in only 6 months.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, we're going to be coming back to this topic, no doubt.
Yes.
And I think for the moment, we probably better wrap it up.
Absolutely. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you for joining us here again on Chile Talk, and see you soon.
Ciao.